Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Hello and welcome to mini episode 377 of Real Life Ghost Stories. Imagine we've done 377 mini episodes. You know, you say a number and it sort of doesn't really mean anything until you really stop and think about it and you go, 377 mini episodes. And I have 4 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 11th of July 2024, and story number 1 comes from Eriqua. My first story has some context behind it. In Perth, Australia, we have a town called Fremantle that is infamously very haunted, as it was a death hotspot during our war. It houses a very haunted prison named Fremantle Prison. When my older sister was younger, she and my mum went for a tour there on her 16th birthday. Creepy. My sister believes something followed her home, and for the sake of this story, I will call our house the Orange House. After the tour, the Orange House became very haunted. Things would watch her, talk to her while she slept, and befriend me as an 8-year-old. My mum caught a photo of a ghost man standing when they went. I have many stories from this house, but one stands out the most. For a little more context, I would get terrible nightmares during this time about shadow people. I had no clue shadow people were a real legend, but in my dreams they would tell me they were shadow people and coming to get me. I would also get tormented by the walk-in closet in my room and would hear things trying to draw me in. Like whatever was in there wanted me to go into my closet in the middle of the night. So naturally I would sleep in my mum's room with her. One night, my mum was still awake in the living room while I was sleeping with her door open. I could see the whole light cast into the room. For some reason I couldn't sleep, so I was lying there with my eyes open, and at one point during this insomnia, I watched my mother walk into the room, into her ensuite toilet, turn on the light in there, close the door, and turn on the shower at full pressure. After a few minutes, my mum walked into the room and asked me why I had turned the shower on. I told her I didn't, and that I thought I saw her walk in and do it. She went into the bathroom and turned the shower off and just brushed it off. At first you would think maybe it was my imagination, and the shower head was backed up, causing it to spurt out water. But when my mum turned the shower off, I physically heard her turning the squeaky water handles for a few seconds. So there was no way it was just backed up. Something had turned the water handles enough to cause the shower to be on at full pressure. My next story comes from the house we lived at after we moved out of the Orange House. I wouldn't call this house haunted, but it had a thick, dark energy around it. My mum used to say that she thought something bad had happened there in the past, because as soon as you would step foot in there, you could feel a heaviness and a darkness. Spirits definitely passed through the house from time to time, but it was never consistently haunted. This house layout was kind of like a huge rectangle. One end had the garage and the other end had a living room. One day I was home alone and I was standing in the living room facing the TV with my back to the rest of the house. I heard the garage door rattle, and from the door I heard what sounded like bare feet running towards me on the tile floors at full speed, and then stopping directly behind me. I still get chills thinking about this because I could feel the presence of something behind me. Another time in that same house, I was sitting on my bed in my room that was originally supposed to be a separate living area, so it didn't have a door. I just used a large curtain for privacy. But this night I had the curtain open and I watched my mum slowly walk past my room and turn into her bedroom from my peripherals. Something about the way she slowly walked and how straight and stiffly she was moving freaked me out. So I called out to her to see what was going on, and she came from the complete other direction. I asked her if she just walked past my room, and she told me that no, she had been in the living room the whole time. One night my mum was awake at around 2 a.m. working late in the living room, and she saw her friend walk through the house and down the hallway. She thought it was me at first, but when she got up and checked on me, I was asleep in bed. The next day my mum had got the news that her friend had passed away that night at around 2:30 a.m. We've since moved into another house, and there is no bad energy here at all, and I've had zero ghostly experiences, other than hearing or feeling the presence of pets that have died, which I count as good energy. I really dislike doppelganger stories. They just give me that little bit of anxiety that I don't want or need. Is it possible that this doppelganger energy that we see here, like your mum walking into the other room, turn the light on, close the door, and turn the shower on, like it's such a normal thing to do, right, in your day-to-day life, that you'd be like, oh, mum's just going for a shower, and then you realise that it's not actually her. Like, is it like your mum astral planing somehow when she's awake? You know, does your physical energy give off energy that allows that sort of goes through the motions of things that you do daily? Is that what this is? Or is it like a timeline thing where timelines are being mixed up and you're seeing your mum in a different timeline just ever so briefly? And the idea, right, in the next house of hearing those bare feet running on tiles at full speed. Oh, stop. That is terrifying. And your second doppelganger encounter, right? The idea of it walking slightly off, like straight and stiffly, so that it makes that feeling in your stomach, you know, where you know that something is not quite right. Oh, it's just so scary. That's obviously your ma from like the shittest timeline. And as for your mom, like seeing her friend at the moment of her death, do they call that a crisis apparition? I don't know if that's the correct definition of a crisis apparition. But it, you know, I think things like that happen more than we like to think. Whether or not people actually see the person walking through the house, or they hear them, or they get a sense of them, or they dream about them. I just think that when people have connections, you end up kind of instinctively knowing when something has happened, and to get that call the next day and say your friend died at this time, that would rattle me. But also there's kind of a weird comfort in it, you know. Maybe it was your mum's friend taking that time to say goodbye as they passed over, because your mum was a very important person in their life. And I'm probably just trying to make the most out of a terrifying situation. And story number 2 comes from Anonymous. I'm a true skeptic of a lot of the paranormal, but that doesn't stop me from having a healthy fear of lots of spooky shit. I saw The Exorcist when I was a kid and cannot bring myself to watch that movie ever again. I am not sensitive to the paranormal, nor do I attach a ghost label to everything unexplained. However, I do keep a Bible in my bedroom and verbally throw the Lord's Prayer at anything that goes bump in the night. I mean, just to be safe, right? I'm just a regular middle-aged guy who loves scary movies but hates anything that may or may not invite evil into my house. Precautions aside, there have been a few things in my life that have scared the ever-living shit out of me. Let's begin. In 2007, my 4-year-old son and myself were eagerly anticipating the release of Spiderman 3 in theatres. My son was a big fan of superhero movies, and I was more than happy to indulge that interest. This particular Spider-Man movie was introducing the new black costume. While watching the movie, I could sense the fear in my son when he saw the black costume. It never occurred to me that it might scare him, so we left early, stopped by a comic book shop on the way home to get some action figures instead. A few months later, we were playing in the hallway of our home when I noticed his gaze turn up to a corner of our vaulted ceiling. I asked him what he was looking at. With a nervous look on his face, he said, "Spiderman." My blood ran cold. I saw nothing. On to the next spooky event. I'm not sure when this happened, maybe 10 years ago. I was drifting off to sleep one night after indulging in a couple of whiskies and a sleeping pill. Somewhere between comatose and somewhat alert, I felt movement near my leg nearest to the edge of the bed. I reached down to see what had caused it and felt a depression in the memory foam mattress. I sprung from my sleep fog, flipped on the light, just in time to see the memory foam mattress a fraction of a second before it had returned to its original state. I slept with the lights on that night. My wife and I are both in our 50s. We both snore like dragons. She just yelled at me for saying that. Something about throwing her under the bus. Anyway, I'm a very light sleeper. I require sleep aids and earplugs to get me through the night undisturbed. I also have a fan for air circulation and white noise. All these elements in place, I find that on occasion, it feels like someone is running barefoot across the hardwood floor at the foot of my bed. I can't hear anything because of the earplugs. It's like I can feel the vibration, like when you feel the bass in some music. In conclusion, I feel like there is a potential explanation for all these events. But it doesn't stop me from breaking out in goosebumps every time I see movement out of the corner of my eye when nobody's there. For me, it's not what I see that scares me, it's what I don't see. As I said before, I am a true skeptic, but better safe than sorry. Wonder if I can buy rosaries on Amazon. Anonymous, you'll be glad to know that yes, indeed, you can buy rosary beads on Amazon. And I am of the same ilk as you. Like, I don't go to church. I'm not really a believer. I was raised Catholic, as you guys know. But do you think I've got rosary beads in my car? Yes, I do. Of course I do. If I'm in a pickle, I'll be like, okay, God. Now, I know I haven't been the best Catholic. That's a Simpsons reference for anybody who gets it. Either that or I go, okay, God, I don't like you and you don't like me. But, you know, I might not necessarily believe and go to mass and all that stuff, but I'm not taking any risks either. We've talked a lot on the podcast about, you know, the fact that kids seem to be more in tune with things that adults can't see. And they seem to be more accepting and in tune with the other side, you know. And I wonder if your son was seeing like shadow people, that kind of thing, and the only point of reference he had was, you know, the black suited Spiderman, and was like, shit, you know, in his child brain was obviously like, well, that's the same thing. So Spiderman is what I'm going to refer to those shadow things as. I mean, that absolutely does not help the situation. If it's helpful, maybe your son was just reminiscing about Spider-Man and being like, what a scary time that was, rather than it being anything in the present, in the moment. And I often wonder if, you know, people that we've loved and lost use the nighttime to come and check in on us, you know, that they can come and sit at the edge of your bed and take it all in. And maybe at various points in life, we just catch those moments when we're meant to be asleep, or we catch those moments when we don't expect it to happen. I mean, feeling like somebody is running around the room barefoot is absolutely hideous, but I totally understand what you mean. You can like feel the vibration, almost like you sense it in a way. So totally, yeah, grim. Anyway, just chuck an hour father out and chuck the Lord's Prayer. Done and dusted.
This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first, call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee with your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 an order. Additional terms apply. Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
And story number 3 comes from Lauren. I'm kind of like you and consider myself an open-minded skeptic. So even though I love hearing ghost tales, I take them with a grain of salt, and my own story is no exception. On February the 13th, 2023, I had to put to rest my little chihuahua Tootsie, who had been with me for 15 years. My now husband got her for me as a tiny little rat when I was 17, so we basically grew up together and I took her everywhere with me. Anyone that has a chihuahua knows they usually only bond with 1 or 2 people, so I was everything to her and she was everything to me. For weeks I had to watch her wither away as I had always vowed to never use euthanasia. This was because my dad had to utilise this drug for his own chihuahua's passing a few years prior due to a collapsed esophagus, and he had a really bad reaction. He was just as close to his dog as I was to mine, so it was heartbreaking to witness for all, and it's still hard to talk about either of their passing. After watching her grow weaker and willing for her to pass on her own terms, I finally decided I would have to make that terrible call to end her suffering, and with much pain we took her to the vet. It went as badly as I feared, and she had the same bad reaction as my dad's dog did years before, and though I know it was a kindness to end it for her, I still struggle with the guilt of causing her so much pain in her final moments. After it was done, I brought her home, built her a wooden coffin and buried her in an area I've now designated as a pet cemetery, as I have many more animals that will someday have to be laid to rest as well. About 2 weeks later, I was sitting in bed folding laundry and watching the UK version of the show Ghosts. I paused it to talk to my husband about something and ended up discussing Tootsie. He went down to the basement afterwards and I resumed the show. Not 1 minute in, one of the characters was discussing a play or something and started shouting, "Tootsie! Tootsie!" over and over. I was stunned to say the least. I still don't know if this was my little butt munch, that's what I always called her, sorry, or just a coincidence. But I cling to it like a rosary and hope with everything in me that she's out there somewhere okay and happy and that I'll see her again someday. Oh, Lauren, I am sorry. It's just so hard. And 15 years as to have this baby, this child, that's what it feels like. You know, it feels like this little creature is your flesh and blood. And having to say goodbye is really, really horrible. And I am a firm believer, and I'm just going to say this now, I'm a firm believer that euthanizing your pet is the right thing to do if they are in pain and if they are suffering. So I really absolutely do not think you should feel any guilt about making that decision. And I do genuinely firmly believe that if our pets could communicate with us in a way that we could understand better, that they would say, I would rather be euthanized than carry on suffering in the way that I'm suffering. And I firmly believe that. And I do believe that they come back to say, hey, we're okay, and, you know, I love you and I'm going to see you again at some point. And if I were you, I would be accepting this as her way of being like, I'm here, I will be here for you when the time comes, and I love you, and I just want to let you know that I'm safe and happy. And our final story today comes from Kaylee. For background, we live in an old Massachusetts house, so obviously we assume it's haunted. We bought it from an older woman when I was pregnant, and she told us she was born and raised in the house and wanted it to go to a family. She had been living there with her brother for a while, but he had recently passed and she was moving to be with other family now. My husband and I constantly referred to the brother as our ghost whenever anything happens. Lights flickering, weird sounds, etc. That's just Alan, we always say. Just our playful and protective presence. I'm a mother of 2 and had my youngest just about a year ago now. When she was a couple of months old, we had extremely rough sleepless nights. We would both take turns getting up with her, but at this stage she would only really calm down for me. So I mostly let my husband rest through the night so at least one of us wasn't as exhausted. One night I was rocking her to sleep at around 2 a.m. and I started to fall asleep while holding her. I heard the loudest scream shouting my name, and I immediately woke up and looked over to my husband. He was completely asleep, as was the baby in my arms. I was so relieved she was breathing peacefully and I didn't drop her or anything in the moment of falling asleep. Whether it was a ghost or my subconscious waking me to protect the baby, I'm thankful it happened. And you bet I looked around and just sighed. Thanks, Alan. Maybe less scary next time. Yeah, maybe less scary. Maybe just a little like psst in your ear would be much better than as somebody screaming your name. Either way, I mean, whether it was your subconscious, whether it was Alan, either way, it had a good outcome, and that's the main thing. Can I also just say that I always just tip my hat, raise a glass to parents, all parents, any parents who managed to get through that stage of sleepless nights. And whoa, I don't know how you guys do it, honestly. Listen, maybe a ghost to give a little helping hand every so often is what everybody needs when they're a new parent, but in a non-scary way. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Eriqua, Anonymous, Lauren and Kaylee for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from July the 11th, 2024. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.